Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. We're here today with special guest, Dolen Perkins-Valdez, who's here to share with us her new book, Happy Land. So did you know the true story of the Kingdom of Happy Land? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Dolen Perkins-Valdez is a New York Times best-selling author of Take My Hand. She's an associate professor of literature at American University, a graduate of Harvard, and a former University of California's President's Postdoctoral Fellow at UCLA. So welcome to the show, Dolen Perkins-Valdez.
Thank you for having me.
My goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. I was so impressed with this book. I'd love for you to share with our listeners what inspired you to write this.
Well, it's so funny. I always say that my books find me rather than I go looking for them. And I stumbled on this story while researching banjo players in Western North Carolina. And I just thought it was fascinating, and the first thing I was just wondering was if it was true or not. And once I reached out to the locals in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and I found out that it was true and not just a fairy tale, I thought I have to write this book.
So when we talk about Happy Land, what is that?
Happy Land was a community of freed people who were from South Carolina, and they came up, they walked up, they were fleeing. I believe they were fleeing violence in South Carolina at the time, and they came up the turnpike and established a remote community in the mountains of Western North Carolina. They called that place Happy Land, and that was their paradise on earth. They decided that they were going to basically extricate themselves from the United States and create their own form of communal living. They named a king and a queen, and they lived there.
I think that part of history that if you hadn't written this, I think in many ways would have been forgotten. Why do you think it's so important to have written this book now?
I think it's always important at any given moment to think about lost histories. I think that we often think about the United States as a young country, vis-a-vis other countries, but there's still a lot of history here, rich history right here in our country. And I think it's important for us to know that history. It's really important for young people. I mean, there are still Happy Land descendants out there, and I was able to tell them about some of the research I did that was about their family lineage. So I think it's always important for us to be excavating stories.
So can you share with us a little bit about the story? We don't want to give a spoiler here.
So the story is told in two timelines. The historical timeline tells the story of Luella, who was in that original band of settlers who came up the mountain and who would eventually be named Queen. She is an important historical figure who actually existed, and I wanted to tell what I knew about her story, but also what I imagined her story might have been. The contemporary stories follows her descendant, Nikki, whose grandmother still lives right there where near where the old kingdom existed, and who tells her about this place and this land that was passed down in the family. Nikki doesn't know anything about it. She is at first she doesn't believe it, and as the book goes on, she begins to understand that her grandmother's telling her the truth.
Well, I know you did a lot of research for this book. Was there something that you uncovered that surprised you?
Well, yes, because for many years it was believed that they came from Mississippi. There was a pamphlet published in the 1950s, and that pamphlet was considered to be the primary source of information about the kingdom for decades. And when I first started researching this, it just didn't make sense to me that they came from Mississippi. First of all, it was just really far to travel. I mean, people did travel far after slavery ended, but it was really far. There were other communities along the way that they could have joined. And so when we discovered and traced those original settlers right back to Spartanburg County, South Carolina, I was just really shocked about that. And I thought, okay, so now we have to figure out why they left. And so there's lots of little details that come out in the book that I believe, based on what I read in the newspaper accounts, are reasons why they left. But in a nutshell, though, I think they were fleeing violence.
Seems that land ownership is a very significant theme in Happy Land. And as we look, particularly in the context of African American and historical ongoing struggle with land loss, how does this theme play out throughout both historical and contemporary characters?
I am originally from Memphis, and my daddy always believed in land ownership. Daddy could be going out in his backyard, and he would say he was going out on his back 40. It was in his imagination. He owned acres and acres of land, and we lived in a regular old neighborhood in Memphis. So I think for many Black people, particularly those of a certain generation, but even now, land ownership was synonymous with citizenship. To own land was to fully be an American citizen. It was as important as voting, it was as important as anything else that you did to exercise your rights of citizenship. And when that land was taken by nefarious means, it not only was profoundly debilitating to African Americans and to African American communities, it also set back generations of families financially because land ownership was the path to wealth. And when you lost your land, you lost your generational wealth. And that's another thing that I wanted to explore here in Happy Land. I wanted to think about all the things that land means to us as Americans.
It really does have such a powerful piece for many people's story. I know when my family immigrated to Hawaii, land ownership was a very big deal to them. So when we look at the settling of Western North Carolina, how does that contribute to the mood and themes of the story?
Well, Western North Carolina is a special place. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's mountainous country. The Blue Ridge Mountains and Appalachia extends through there. It has a rich culture. I mentioned earlier that I found this story while researching banjo players. That it has a rich culture of music, rich foodways there. Every time I visited when I was researching, I had a really good meal at somebody's house. So, what I tried to do was really capture, particularly in the contemporary setting, but also in the historical setting, the beauty of Western North Carolina. Um, and and I'm really glad I did. We know most recently they were hit by a hurricane and they're still rebuilding, I hear. And I know a lot of people who were personally affected. But I just love that part of the country. Um, and when you walk around there, you do feel like you're in a special place. And I can only imagine what it must have felt like for those kingdom dwellers to walk that land and to look out over the ridge and just think about all of the possibility of America.
Well, you wrote that so beautifully and brought that all together. I just love how that really shapes this story. And one of the things that I found very interesting is when you talk about the dynasties of Happy Land and the Kingdom of Happy Land. I mean, how does this incorporate into the royalty narrative within Black empowerment today?
That's a really good question. I mean, nowadays you'll hear Black women refer to each other as queens, or you might hear them refer to Black men as kings. There's a sort of colloquial parlance around Black folks as royalty, which really stems from our imaginings of the kinds of lives we led before we were forced into ships and brought over here against our will. So I think the way that Black people think about royalty is both one of pride and one of pain. And for this particular book, I thought, why don't I just focus on the part of it that is pride? And why don't I focus on the part of it that is good? Because we know that, not every person who was brought over here against their will was of royal descent. We do know that there were ancient civilizations in Africa that were magnificent. And so, what I really wanted to focus on in this book is, what if it were true? What if we could sort of gather the best of, African culture and bring it here and recreate it in a way. It was an imaginative project for sure, but I love this question of what if, what if, what if.
I love how you bring us to this intersection of storytelling and history in shaping the narrative of Happy Land's families and communities. What would you like readers and our listeners to take away from this book?
I just hope that people will think carefully about what land ownership means. I hope they'll think carefully about some of the ways in which families are still losing their land today. And maybe it will also, I was just thinking about this the other day, maybe it'll inspire somebody to do their family tree. I know a lot of people are into family trees, but there's still a lot of families that haven't done that. And so my hope is that, there will be, I always call it the family busybody. There will be some family busybody who decides to start creating the family tree for the family, because I think it's really important to know.
Have a sense of where you've come from. I think it brings a lot of power on where we go.
That's right.
Well, Dolen, I think your book is just, Happy Land is such a great read. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Well, they can go to my website, which is just my name, dolenperkinsvaldez.com, and I try to keep a list of my in-person events updated on there.
Well, Dolen, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much, Marianne.
Well, thank you, Dolen. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Happy Land. Happy Land's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.